There's a certain kind of person who will suffer in silence rather than send a single text asking for help. They'll spend hours trying to fix something that someone else could solve in 5 minutes. They'll carry burdens that are breaking them rather than admit they can't do it alone. And if you ask them why, they'll tell you they're fine. They'll say they don't want to bother anyone. They'll insist they can handle it. But the truth hiding beneath those words is far more complex, far more human, and far more painful than anyone realizes. Because the psychology of people who never ask for help is not a story about strength. It's a story about fear. A fear so deeply woven into their sense of self that asking for help feels like admitting something unforgivable. And if you've ever felt your throat tighten at the thought of reaching out, if you've ever convinced yourself that struggling alone is somehow noble, if you've ever wondered why 3 simple words feel impossible to say, then this is a story you need to hear. Let me take you into the mind of someone who cannot ask for help. Not the surface explanations, not the easy assumptions, but the deeper psychological truths that trap someone in isolation, even when support is within reach. It often begins with a moment that feels almost universal. You're struggling with something. Maybe it's practical, like moving furniture or understanding a work problem. Maybe it's emotional, like loneliness or anxiety that's becoming unbearable. You know exactly who you could call. You know they would probably help. But when you imagine typing that message or making that phone call, something inside you recoils. Not with embarrassment exactly, but with something heavier. Something that whispers you shouldn't need this. You should be able to handle this yourself. What kind of person can't figure this out alone? And so you close your phone and return to struggling, telling yourself it's better this way. This is where the psychology reveals itself, because what most people don't understand is that the inability to ask for help is rarely about pride in the way we typically think of it. It's about something much deeper. For many of these individuals, asking for help feels like exposing a fundamental flaw in their character. It feels like admitting they are not who they believe they should be. Psychologists call this self-sufficiency schema, a deeply ingrained belief that needing others represents personal failure. These individuals learned early, sometimes explicitly, but often through subtle messages, that independence is the highest virtue and dependence is shameful. Their self-worth became attached to the idea that they should be capable, strong, and self-reliant at all times. And when you build your identity on never needing anyone, asking for help doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It feels like dismantling who you are. But there's another layer that makes this even more complicated. Many people who can't ask for help grew up in environments where their needs were dismissed, minimized, or met with frustration. Maybe they had parents who were overwhelmed and couldn't handle one more request. Maybe they learned that asking created tension or guilt. Maybe they were told directly or indirectly that their problems weren't important enough to warrant attention. So they adapted. They learned to be small, to be easy, to require nothing. And that childhood survival strategy became an adult prison. Now, even when they desperately need support, their nervous system tells them that asking is dangerous, that needing something will lead to rejection or burden. The psychological term for this is attachment-based self-reliance. It's when someone learns that emotional safety comes from not needing anyone because needing someone in the past led to pain. These individuals often appear incredibly capable and independent, but underneath that competence is a profound loneliness and a belief that they must face everything alone because no one will reliably be there anyway. There's also a third psychological pattern that shows up frequently. Some people can't ask for help because they carry an overwhelming sense of indebtedness. They believe that accepting help creates a debt they'll never be able to repay. Their mind keeps a careful ledger of who has done what for whom, and the idea of owing someone something feels intolerable. This often stems from growing up in environments where love was transactional, where help came with strings attached, where favors were later used as leverage or guilt. They learned that accepting support meant giving someone power over them. So now they refuse help, not because they don't want it, but because they're terrified of what accepting it might cost them later. But here's what makes this truly heartbreaking. People who cannot ask for help are often incredibly generous with others. They're the first ones to show up when someone else needs support. They'll drop everything to help a friend move or listen to someone's problems for hours. They believe deeply in helping others, but they cannot extend that same compassion to themselves. This creates a painful paradox. They value interdependence for everyone except themselves. They understand, logically, that people need each other, but they have a specific exemption carved out for their own needs. And if you ask them about this contradiction, they'll tell you that other people's needs are legitimate while their own are not. Other people deserve help, but they should be able to manage alone. Psychologists recognize this as a sign of deep shame around vulnerability, often rooted in the belief that their worth comes from what they provide rather than who they are. Now, let's look at what happens inside someone's mind when they're deciding whether to ask for help. It's not a simple choice between asking and not asking. It's an entire internal negotiation filled with competing voices and fears. First, there's the practical voice that says, asking makes sense. That someone could help quickly, that suffering alone is inefficient. But then immediately, other voices rush in. The voice that says, if you can't handle this yourself, you're weak. The voice that insists you're bothering people and they'll resent you for it. The voice that reminds you of every time you've felt like a burden in the past. The voice that tells you if you just try harder, you can figure it out alone. The voice that warns you that people who help you will lose respect for you. And beneath all these voices is a deeper fear. The fear that if you ask and someone says no, it will confirm your worst belief about yourself. That you're not worth helping, that you're too much, that you're fundamentally alone in this world. So, rather than risk that confirmation, they choose the familiar pain of struggling alone. At least that pain is predictable. At least it doesn't involve the terror of rejection. There's something else that rarely gets discussed. For some people, not asking for help is tied to a need for control. If they handle everything themselves, they don't have to depend on anyone else's timeline, anyone else's willingness, anyone else's competence. They don't have to navigate the vulnerability of waiting to see if someone will follow through. They don't have to manage the disappointment if help doesn't arrive. Doing it alone means they control the outcome, even if the process is harder. This often develops in people who experienced unreliability in childhood, whether adults in their life made promises they didn't keep or provided inconsistent support. These individuals learned that counting on others leads to disappointment, so they simply stopped counting on anyone. It often begins with a moment that feels almost universal. You're struggling with something. Maybe it's practical, like moving furniture or understanding a work problem. Maybe it's emotional, like loneliness or anxiety that's becoming unbearable. You know exactly who you could call. You know they would probably help. But here's what this does to a person over time. When you go through life refusing to ask for help, you start to build walls that you didn't necessarily intend to build. You become known as the capable one, the strong one, the person who has it all together. And that reputation becomes another reason you can't ask for help. Because now you have an image to maintain. Typing that message or making that phone call, something inside you recoils. People expect you to be fine. They don't check in as often because you seem so self-sufficient. And the lonelier you feel, the harder it becomes to break that pattern. Because admitting you're struggling would require explaining why you've hidden it for so long. This is the isolation loop. The less you ask for help, the more isolated you become. The more isolated you become, the harder it feels to reach out. And eventually, you're so disconnected that asking for help starts to feel not just difficult, but almost impossible. Like trying to speak a language you've forgotten. There's another painful element to this. People who never ask for help often develop a deep resentment that they can't quite articulate. They look around and see other people asking for things easily, receiving support without shame, leaning on their communities without apparent guilt, and part of them feels angry. Why does it seem so easy for everyone else? Why can they need people without it destroying them? But that anger often turns inward. They blame themselves for not being able to do what others do naturally. They add it to their list of personal failures. They're not just struggling with the original problem, they're now struggling with shame about struggling, and shame about not being able to ask for help with the struggling. It becomes layers upon layers of psychological weight. Now, let's talk about what happens when someone like this finally does try to ask for help. Because sometimes desperation overrides all the internal barriers. Sometimes the situation becomes so dire that they have no choice. And you'd think that when they finally reach out and receive help, it would bring relief. Sometimes it does. But often, it brings a complicated mix of emotions. Yes, there's gratitude. Yes, there's relief. But there's also intense shame, a feeling of exposure, a sense that they've revealed something about themselves they wanted to keep hidden. After receiving help, they often immediately begin trying to repay the person, not out of healthy reciprocity, but out of desperate need to eliminate the feeling of debt. They overcompensate. They insist on doing something in return. They cannot simply receive. And if the person who helped them says it's not necessary, that it was nothing, that's what friends do, they often can't believe it. Their mind tells them there must be a hidden cost, a judgment being formed, a burden being calculated. For some people, the experience of asking for help and receiving it doesn't teach them that asking is safe. It reinforces their belief that needing help is shameful because the shame they feel afterward is so intense. This is why breaking this pattern is so difficult. The solution seems simple from the outside. Just ask for help. Just reach out. Just let people support you. But for someone trapped in this psychology, those suggestions feel as useful as telling someone with depression to just be happy. The barrier isn't logical. It's emotional, neurological, deeply embedded in their sense of safety and identity. There's also a specific type of person who can't ask for help. Someone who has been the helper for so long that reversing roles feels impossible. These are often people who grew up as caregivers, maybe to a parent who was struggling, maybe to younger siblings, maybe in a family where someone needed to be the responsible one and they took on that role. They learned early that their value came from being needed, from solving problems, from taking care of others. And now, as adults, the idea of being on the receiving end of care feels foreign and uncomfortable. It's not just that they don't know how to ask. They don't know how to receive. They don't have a framework for being the person who needs, rather than the person who provides. Psychologists call this compulsive caregiving, and it's a trauma response. It's what happens when a child learns that love is conditional on being useful, on not having needs, on always being the strong one. These individuals often attract people who need a lot of support because that's the only kind of relationship dynamic. They know how to navigate, and the pattern continues. They give and give and give, and when they're finally depleted, they still can't ask for anything back because their entire identity is built on not needing. But here's something important. This inability to ask for help doesn't make someone noble or admirable, even though our culture sometimes treats self-sufficiency as a virtue. It makes them exhausted. It makes them lonely. It makes them more likely to burn out, to develop anxiety and depression, to feel profoundly disconnected from the people around them. Because humans are not designed to do life alone. We are social creatures who evolved to live in interdependent communities. The belief that you should be able to handle everything yourself is not natural, it's learned. And what's learned can be unlearned, though it's rarely easy. Now, let's look at what's happening in the brain when someone is deciding whether to ask for help. Research in neuroscience shows that for people with this psychology, the thought of asking for help activates the same brain regions associated with threat and danger. Their amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear, lights up. Their nervous system goes into a stress response. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making, becomes less active. In other words, their brain is treating the act of asking for help as a survival threat. This is not an exaggeration or a metaphor. Their body is genuinely responding as if asking for help could harm them. And when your nervous system is in threat mode, rational thoughts like "this person cares about me and would want to help" become almost impossible to access. The fear is louder than the logic. This is why telling someone to just ask doesn't work. You're asking them to override a deeply ingrained survival response. You're asking them to do something their brain has categorized as dangerous. And the only way to change that categorization is through repeated experiences of asking for help and having it go well, which creates new neural pathways that associate asking with safety instead of danger. But getting to that point requires taking the first terrifying step, which is why many people stay stuck in this pattern for years or even their entire lives. There's another dimension to this that involves how these individuals perceive other people. Many people who can't ask for help have developed what psychologists call hostile attribution bias. They tend to interpret ambiguous social situations as negative. If someone doesn't respond to a text immediately, they assume the person is annoyed with them. If someone seems distracted during a conversation, they assume they're being burdensome. If someone offers help, they assume it's out of obligation rather than genuine care. This bias makes asking for help even more difficult because their mind is constantly providing evidence that people don't really want to help them, that they're imposing, that any offer of support is reluctant or conditional. And the painful irony is that this interpretation often becomes self-fulfilling. When you approach every interaction assuming people are annoyed with you or burdened by you, you start behaving in ways that create distance. You become apologetic and self-effacing. You minimize your needs so aggressively that people stop offering. And then your brain says, "See, I was right. No one actually wants to help." But the reality is that your behavior was pushing people away, not because of who you are, but because of the walls you built to protect yourself. Now, let's talk about the specific fear that sits at the center of all of this. The fear that asking for help will reveal that you are fundamentally unlovable. That's the core wound for so many people trapped in this pattern. Somewhere deep inside, they believe that if people see their needs, their struggles, their vulnerability, they will be rejected, they will be too much, they will be abandoned. And so they hide. They perform competence. They suffer in silence, because the known pain of isolation feels safer than the potential pain of being seen and turned away. This belief often forms in childhood, in moments where a child's needs were met with frustration, dismissal, or abandonment. Maybe they cried and were told to stop being dramatic. Maybe they asked for attention and were told the parent was too busy. Maybe they expressed fear or sadness and were told to toughen up. These experiences taught the child that their emotional needs were problematic, that vulnerability was shameful, that they needed to be less in order to be loved. And that child grows into an adult who has internalized the message so deeply that they no longer need anyone else to reject them. They reject themselves preemptively by never asking for anything. But here's the truth that these individuals desperately need to hear. The belief that your needs make you unlovable is a lie. It's a lie told to you by people who were themselves wounded and unable to provide the care you deserved. It's a lie reinforced by a culture that prizes independence over connection. It's a lie that keeps you trapped in unnecessary suffering. Your needs do not make you a burden. Your struggles do not make you weak. Your vulnerability does not make you unworthy. The people who truly love you want to support you. They want to be trusted with your difficulties. They want to show up for you the way you've shown up for them. But they can't help if you never ask. They can't support what you won't reveal. And I know that feels terrifying. I know your brain is telling you right now that this doesn't apply to you, that your situation is different, that people really would be burdened by your needs. But that voice is the trauma speaking. That voice is the wound trying to protect you by keeping you small and hidden and alone. And it's time to stop listening to it. There's something else that needs to be said. Learning to ask for help is not about becoming dependent or needy or incapable. It's about recognizing that interdependence is the natural human state. It's about understanding that strong communities are built on mutual support, not on everyone suffering alone. It's about accepting that you don't have to earn the right to receive care. If you feel that tightness in your chest when you imagine reaching out to someone, I want you to know that change is possible. It won't happen overnight. It won't be comfortable, but it is possible. The first step is simply noticing the pattern, recognizing when you're in pain and automatically deciding to handle it alone. Notice the thoughts that arise. Notice the stories your mind tells about what would happen if you asked. Notice the fear beneath those stories. The second step is starting small. Don't try to dismantle years of conditioning by asking for something huge. Ask for something tiny. Ask someone to recommend a restaurant. Ask a coworker to explain something you didn't understand. Ask a friend if they have a few minutes to talk. Not because you desperately need these things, but because you're practicing the act of asking, letting your nervous system experience that asking does not lead to disaster. Each small ask that goes well creates a tiny bit of evidence that maybe, possibly, asking for help is not as dangerous as your brain believes it to be. And over time, those tiny bits of evidence accumulate. Your brain starts to recategorize, asking for help from threat to neutral to potentially even safe. But you have to be patient with yourself. You have to understand that this pattern formed over years, and it will take time to change. There will be setbacks. There will be moments where asking feels impossible again. That's normal. That's part of the process. What matters is that you keep trying, keep noticing, keep taking small steps toward connection instead of isolation. One more thing. If someone in your life struggles to ask for help, the best thing you can do is not wait for them to ask. Offer specifically. Don't say, "Let me know if you need anything." Say, "I'm going to the store. Can I pick something up for you?" Say, "I have time this weekend. Can I help you with that project?" Make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. Make it clear that helping you brings you joy, not burden. Be patient with their discomfort. Understand that if they decline your offer, it's not about you. It's about their internal struggle. Keep offering, keep showing up, keep demonstrating that you're safe, that you're reliable, that your care is not conditional. Sometimes people need to be shown over and over again that it's okay to need someone before they can finally believe it. Because at the end of the day, the psychology of people who never ask for help is not really about help. It's about belonging. It's about the fundamental human need to know that you're not alone, that you matter, that your pain is seen and your presence is valued. What's one thing you've been struggling with alone that you could ask someone for help with today? Let me know in the comments, and if this resonated with you, subscribe for more insights into the hidden psychology that shapes how we move through the world.